Country girl is forced to marry a poor man, not knowing he was a disguised millionaire. In a small rural town in Kentucky lived Grace Johnson, a 22-year-old whose green eyes had already witnessed too much suffering. Since her mother's death, 5 years earlier, Grace had been living like a servant in her own home, mistreated by her alcoholic father and cruel stepmother, Diane. She would wake before dawn to tend to the animals, wash clothes in the creek, and prepare meals. She often went to bed hungry, sleeping in a tiny room that was more like a storage closet. Her only comfort was Tyler, her 7-year-old half-brother, for whom she told stories and made little straw toys, despite Diane's attempts to keep them apart. At night, when everyone was asleep, Grace would gaze at the stars through her cracked window, dreaming of a different life. Before her mother's death, she had been the top student at the local school, with teachers who saw her potential. But Diane had thrown away her books, saying that books don't fill empty stomachs. Still, Grace kept newspaper clippings about universities under her torn mattress, keeping alive the hope that she might study someday. Summer was at its peak when a stranger showed up at the Johnsons' farm. Michael Thompson, tall and broad-shouldered, wore simple but clean clothes and carried only a worn backpack. He had come from the big city looking for temporary work. Mr. Johnson hired him for 3 months of work for a fair amount. Michael slept in the old barn and proved to be tireless, fixing fences, reinforcing the roof, and helping with the harvest. At first, Grace kept her distance. Years of mistreatment had taught her to be wary, especially of men. However, she noticed that Michael was different. He treated her with respect, something rare in her life. Once, when Diane unfairly scolded her, Michael took the blame, lying to protect her. Gradually, a friendship began to blossom. During work breaks, they would sit in the shade of the oak tree. Michael told stories about New York, with its skyscrapers and bustling streets. Grace shared her knowledge of local plants, revealing her intelligence and sensitivity. At night, when everyone was asleep, Michael made complex notes in his notebook, records far beyond what you'd expect from a simple farm worker. Little Tyler, who had developed admiration for Michael, once caught him writing. "Mr. Michael, why do you write so much?" "I'm just recording my ideas, Tyler, just like your sister keeps clippings about universities." "How do you know about that?" "She never tells anyone." "I observe people, Tyler. It's important to pay attention to details." The 3 months came to an end on a gray autumn day. Michael, having fulfilled his part of the deal, went to the main house to receive his payment. Grace, in the kitchen, heard raised voices in the living room. "What? You think I have all that money just lying around?" "The harvest barely covered the debts," her father yelled, drunk. "We had a clear agreement, sir," Michael replied calmly. "I'm just asking for what I'm owed." Mr. Johnson let out a bitter laugh. "I've got something better than money. My daughter, Grace, you take her with you. She's young, hardworking, doesn't complain. One less mouth to feed." Grace dropped the spoon she was holding, revealing her presence. 3 pairs of eyes turned to her, her father's indifferent ones, Diane's satisfied ones, and Michael's unreadable ones. "Father, you can't," Grace began, her voice faltering. "I can and I will," Mr. Johnson cut her off. "You're 22 years old. It's high time you left this place. And the young man needs a wife." "Wife?" repeated Grace, incredulous. Michael stepped forward. "Mr. Johnson, this wasn't what we agreed upon," the stepmother chimed in. "What difference does it make? In the city, at least she'll have food on the table. It's more than she deserves." Mr. Johnson slammed his glass on the table. "It's decided. You leave tomorrow morning." Michael looked at Grace. "I'll only accept if it's her wish." "Her wish? Since when do women have wishes?" "She's going because I say so." Grace realized she had no choice. With a heavy heart, she nodded. "I'll go." That night, While packing her few belongings, Grace was visited by Tyler. "I brought something for you," said the boy, handing her a small wooden sculpture. "It's a free bird like you're going to be now." Morning arrived cold and silent. Grace woke before dawn, put on her best dress, a simple faded blue outfit, and braided her long hair. Her old backpack contained everything she owned: a few clothes, a book of poems, her mother's broken comb, a rag doll, and Tyler's wooden bird. In the empty kitchen, no one had bothered to prepare her breakfast. Her father and Michael were talking near the pickup truck, while Diane watched from the porch with satisfaction. Grace waited for some gesture of affection from her father, a word, anything. But he simply turned and walked back to the house without looking back. Diane approached only to whisper final cruelties. Before getting into the truck, Grace noticed Tyler hiding behind the barn, waving goodbye while crying. It was this sight, her little brother, the only person who loved her, hiding to say goodbye, that finally broke her composure. Michael, sensing the situation, touched her shoulder. "We have a few minutes before we leave. If you want to say goodbye." Grace ran to her brother, hugging him with all her might. "I'm going to miss you so much." "Promise you won't forget me?" asked the boy. "Never. And someday, we'll find a way to see each other again." On the way to the bus station, Grace cried silently. Michael respected her grief without attempting conversation. At the station, he finally spoke. "I'm sorry about all this, Grace." "It's not your fault," she replied. "Just, please, don't be cruel to me." The request, so simple and direct, revealed the state of her soul. She wasn't asking for love, just the absence of cruelty. "I promise I'll never be cruel to you," Michael replied sincerely. The bus that would take them to New York seemed like a vessel bound for the unknown. Grace chose the window seat, fascinated by the changing landscapes. The first few hours passed in silence, as fields and farms gave way to suburbs and cities. During a meal stop, Michael broke the silence. "How are you feeling?" "I'm not really sure," Grace answered honestly. "Everything's so different. It must be scary leaving everything you know behind. Actually, the scariest part is realizing I'm not as sad as I should be." "That says more about how you were treated in that home than about you," Michael replied. "Sometimes, leaving is the bravest act." As night fell, Grace fell asleep with her head resting on Michael's shoulder. For the first time in years, she didn't feel afraid while falling asleep. There was no drunk father who might burst into her room, no stepmother to wake her brutally. When she opened her eyes hours later, the sight of New York's skyscrapers took her breath away. Lights of every kind illuminated the busy streets. "New York," said Michael, "the city that never sleeps." "It's overwhelming," Grace confessed. "It can be at first, but it's also a place of endless possibilities." There was something in his words that kindled hope in Grace's heart. For the first time, she allowed herself to think that this forced change might be the beginning of something better. The taxi took them to an impressive brownstone building on a tree-lined street in Manhattan. Grace looked out the window in amazement. "You work here?" she asked hesitantly. Michael nodded. "Mrs. Wilson, the property owner, lets me use the guest house in the back." The small house was clean and cozy, with a compact living room, functional kitchen, and 2 bedrooms upstairs. "It's beautiful," Grace said sincerely, touching the soft fabric of the sofa. "It's not very big, but I thought it would be better than the barn where you slept. Anywhere would be better, but this feels like a palace to me." "This will be your room," said Michael, showing her the larger of the 2 bedrooms. "I bought some basics, but we can get more in the coming days." "Why are you doing this?" Grace suddenly asked. "Why treat me like this? You barely know me." "Because nobody deserves to be treated the way you were. And because I saw something in you, a strength, an intelligence, that deserves the chance to flourish. That first night, lying in a real bed, Grace cried with relief and gratitude. In the days that followed, she marveled at amenities others took for granted: hot water from the tap, a stocked refrigerator, reliable electricity. A week after her arrival, Grace met Mrs. Wilson, an elegant middle-aged woman with perceptive eyes. "Welcome to New York, dear. Michael is a valuable employee, and anyone important to him is welcome in my home." A routine was established. Michael worked during the day, and Grace took care of the small house. In the evenings, they ate dinner together and talked about their days. "I've always wanted to study," Grace confessed one night. "Before my mother died, I was the top student in school. And what would you study if you could? Medicine, maybe, or literature, or botany. There are so many possibilities." "It's never too late to start over, Grace. You're 22. Your whole life is ahead of you." Michael brought her a laptop. "So you can explore online courses, see what really interests you." Grace rediscovered her passion for knowledge, spending hours on free courses, academic articles, and educational videos. Mrs. Wilson, noticing her transformation, offered her a job. "My assistant chef just quit. I think you could fill the position. The pay is good, and the hours are flexible." So, besides studying, Grace began working in the main house's kitchen, discovering a talent she didn't know she had. The most surprising thing was her relationship with Michael. Although technically married, he never pressured her for intimacy, treating her with respect. "Why have you never, Grace asked one day, blushing. "We're married. At least that's what everyone thinks. Grace, you came here not by choice, but by circumstance. You're not property. If someday there's something between us, it will be because we both want it, not out of obligation." Slowly, Grace realized she was falling in love with Michael. Not out of gratitude, but for the kind and intelligent man he revealed himself to be each day. Months passed, and with them, Grace's life blossomed. Her job as assistant chef gave her financial independence, while her online studies prepared her for the high school equivalency exam. One evening during dinner, Grace found courage. Michael, technically we're considered married, but there was never a real ceremony. I'd like to do this properly. Not out of obligation, but because I choose to. "Are you proposing to me, Grace Johnson?" She laughed, a sound that was once rare. "I guess I am." 2 weeks later, in a simple civil ceremony, with only Mrs. Wilson as witness, they made their union official. "In all the years I've known Michael," Mrs. Wilson commented, "I've never seen him as happy as since you arrived. He completely changed my life." "Sometimes, dear, we choose our own destiny. You had strength inside you long before Michael appeared. He just helped you find it." That night, for the first time, Grace and Michael shared the same room, not as a man who had bought a wife, but as partners who had freely chosen each other. "Why did you accept my father's deal?" Grace asked. "When I arrived at that farm, I saw how you were treated, noticed your wasted intelligence. When your father made that absurd proposal, I realized it was a way to get you out of that toxic environment. So you saved me out of pity?" At first, maybe it was compassion, but it quickly turned into admiration, respect, and with time, love. "I love you too," Grace replied, the words coming easily. Michael took a deep breath. "I wanted to see what it was like to live without the privilege, to see how rural communities function firsthand for a research project. When I saw how you were being treated, I couldn't just walk away." "So this was all some kind of social experiment?" Grace felt her world spinning. "And now your brother is making passes at me? What game are you two playing?" "No game. Nathan doesn't know. Only my mother knew who I really was." "Your mother knows? The same woman who just suggested I should consider her other son's indecent proposal? What is wrong with your family?" When I told her I was planning to reveal everything to you today, she must have decided to test you first, to see if you were with me for the right reasons. Test me? Grace's voice rose. Like I'm some gold digger you need protection from? After everything I've been through? I'm sorry, Grace. I wanted to tell you so many times, but I was afraid. Afraid you'd think everything between us was built on lies. Wasn't it? Tears streamed down her face. The poor farm worker rescuing the abused country girl, the modest guest house, the struggle to build a new life. It was all fiction. The house is modest, by my family's standards. And everything else, my feelings for you, the respect, the love, that's all real. The only thing I lied about was my background. Grace paced the room, trying to process this revelation. So what now? We move into the mansion? I become Mrs. Grace Wilson, Billionaire's wife? The girl your mother tested with cash to see if she'd cheat? Michael approached her cautiously. What happens next is entirely up to you. If you want to leave me, I'll understand. I'll make sure you have everything you need. Education, a place to live, whatever you want. More solutions involving your money, Grace said bitterly. No. I meant, Michael fumbled for words. I just want you to know you have options. Grace stared at the man she thought she knew. The quiet strength, the kindness, the patience, those hadn't changed. But now there was this massive secret between them. Did you ever plan to tell me? Or would we have lived our whole lives with me never knowing who you really are? I was going to tell you after you finished your GED. I wanted you to feel secure in yourself first, to know your own strength. Grace fell silent, remembering something. Wait, your mother called you a security guard earlier. Another lie? I do manage security for all Wilson corporate properties. It's one of my roles in the company. Grace sat down, suddenly exhausted. I need time to think. This is too much. Of course, Michael said, heading toward the door. I'll stay at the main house tonight. As he reached for the doorknob, Grace spoke again. Why did you really marry me, Michael? The truth this time. He turned, his eyes meeting hers. Because that first night on the bus, when you fell asleep on my shoulder without fear, I knew I'd do anything to keep you safe. And then, day by day, I fell in love with your resilience, your kindness despite everything you'd endured, your thirst for knowledge. The marriage started as protection, but it became the most real thing in my life. As the door closed behind him, Grace was left alone with the truth, and a decision that would shape the rest of her life. When I went to Kentucky, I had no intention of staying. But then I met you, saw your potential being wasted. And when your father made that absurd proposal, I saw a chance to get you out of that situation. But you kept lying for months, because, for the first time in my life, someone saw me for who I really was, not for my money or status. You saw me as Michael, just Michael. So you used me to satisfy some simple life complex? No. At first there was selfishness on my part, but then we grew closer, started building something real. Each day it became harder to tell the truth, because I was afraid of losing what we had. What we had was based on lies. What we have is based on mutual respect, admiration, support. I omitted the truth about my background, but I never lied about my feelings. And Nathan's proposal? Mrs. Wilson's suggestion? Nathan has always been competitive. As for my mother, I suspect she was testing your loyalty. Testing? That's sick. You all played with my feelings. You're right. It was wrong. I should have told you the truth. But I was afraid of losing you, because I love you more than I ever thought possible. I need time, Grace finally said. I'm going to Mrs. Wilson's apartment for tonight. All I ask is that when you're ready, give me the chance to show you that the man you knew is who I really am. Before leaving, Grace turned one last time. You know what's ironic? All this time I thought I was lucky to find someone who valued me for who I am. And in the end, it was you who was looking for that. 3 days passed without Grace returning. Michael spent hours on the phone, managing previously priority business, just to occupy his mind. But his thoughts always returned to Grace. On the 4th day, she came back. I talked a lot with your mother, she said, sitting on the sofa. Eleanor Wilson had told Grace about the Michael that the world knew. The technology prodigy, the ruthless CEO, the reserved philanthropist. But also about the son that only she knew. The sensitive boy who suffered from people's fakeness, the man who, despite his achievements, seemed perpetually unsatisfied. I'm still hurt by the lie, said Grace. But I understand why you did it. Your mother told me about your previous relationships, about people who only saw your money. The man I fell in love with, kind, respectful, who valued my mind, that man is real. The money, the status, the name, they're just circumstances, not the essence of who you are. A smile played on her lips. I think you owe me a house in Malibu and a Tesla for the deception. Michael visibly relaxed. Actually, I was thinking of a mansion in the Hamptons. The Hamptons seem acceptable. Does this mean you forgive me? It means I'm willing to start over. No more secrets, no more lies, as equals for real this time. In the months that followed, Michael gradually introduced her to his real world. The company he had founded, the properties, the philanthropic causes he quietly supported. Grace was accepted to Columbia University, where she decided to study medicine. Michael gained custody of Tyler, offering him the opportunity for an education he would never have had on the farm. Years later, Grace graduated from medical school with honors, always with Michael by her side. On a spring morning, while having coffee on the porch of their Hamptons home, she handed him a small package. Inside was a tiny baby shoe. Are you? 3 months, she confirmed, placing her hand on her belly. Michael hugged her carefully, tears of joy in his eyes. A baby. Our baby. Grace gazed out at the ocean, thinking about her journey, from the rundown farm to her medical degree, from constant fear to the security of true love. What are you thinking about? Michael asked. About how life can completely change in an instant. About how sometimes what seems like the end might just be the beginning of something wonderful. You know what amazes me most about you? Even after everything, after all the pain and injustice, you can still see beauty and hope. Grace smiled, placing her hand over his on her belly, because I learned that true strength isn't about ignoring the past, but using it to build a better future. And that's what we'll do for this baby. A future where they'll never doubt their worth. A future where they'll know they're loved unconditionally, Michael added. For who they are, not what they have. And so, from the poor country girl forced to marry a seemingly simple man, to the strong woman now expecting a child with the man who had revealed himself to be much more than appearances suggested, Grace's journey was a testament to the power of human resilience and the transformative force of genuine love.